welcome, and thank you for joining me on this journey through time and wisdom. Today, we are going to explore the fascinating story of Vedic astrology, a tradition that has been guiding humanity for thousands of years. This is not a quick horoscope column you find in a newspaper. This is a living science, a spiritual map, a mirror of karma, and above all, a timeless connection between human beings and the cosmos. When we say Vedic astrology or Jyotish Shastra, we are talking about one of the oldest systems of knowledge known to mankind. The word Jyotish itself means the science of light. Light because it illuminates the path ahead. Light because it connects us with the stars and planets. And light because it helps us see what is often invisible, our karmic patterns, our strengths, and our lessons in life. Now imagine life in the Vedic period more than 5,000 years ago. There were no telescopes, no computers, no satellites scanning the sky. And yet, the rishis, the sages, looked up at the heavens and observed. Night after night, year after year, century after century, they noticed rhythms. They saw the sun marking the day, the moon shaping the months, the planets tracing mysterious but predictable paths. From these observations, they wove together an entire framework that became Jyotish. In the beginning, astrology was not about personal predictions, it was about timekeeping and cosmic alignment. The earliest text we know of, called the Vedamba Jyotisha, composed over 3,000 years ago, was essentially a manual of calendars and rituals. The priests needed to know the right time to perform sacrifices. Farmers needed to know when to sow and when to harvest. Communities needed to know when to celebrate festivals. And all of this depended on the cycles of the heavens. Astrology was, quite literally, the eye of the Vedas. Without it, rituals would lose their power, ceremonies would lose their alignment, and society would lose its rhythm with nature. As centuries passed, this system grew more complex. Great sages began to codify deeper aspects of astrology. One of the most revered among them was Rishi Parashara. He is remembered as the father of predictive astrology. His monumental text, the Parashara Shastra, became the foundation of what we call birth chart analysis. Here, for the first time, we see astrology being applied not just to collective rituals but to individual lives. By casting a chart at the moment of a person's birth, the sages could see the imprint of cosmic forces on that individual's destiny. They saw life as karma unfolding, and the chart as a blueprint of that karma. Alongside Parashara came Varahamihira, a brilliant scholar of the 6th century. His Brihat Samhita was an encyclopedia that covered astrology, astronomy, weather forecasting, architecture, and even gemology. His work shows us how integrated astrology was with every aspect of life. It was not an isolated subject, it was part of medicine, politics, agriculture, and spiritual practice. During this classical period, astrology developed many techniques we still use today. Planetary periods, known as dashas, were introduced to explain how different phases of life would unfold. Yogas, or planetary combinations, describe unique strengths and weaknesses in a chart. Naksharas, the lunar mansions, added another layer of subtlety to interpretation. It is astonishing to think that over 1,500 years ago, scholars were creating such sophisticated models, and much of it is still relevant today. But Vedic astrology did not remain static. As Indian civilization interacted with the outside world, so did astrology. When traders, travelers, and invaders came, knowledge also traveled. The Greeks, after Alexander's campaign, brought their astronomical ideas. The Persians, with their rich astrological traditions, shared concepts of Hori astrology, which is answering questions based on the chart of the moment. Instead of resisting, Vedic astrology absorbed these influences, refined them, and made them its own. This ability to adapt is one of the reasons Jyotish survived when many other knowledge systems faded away. By the medieval period, astrology had become a tool not just for spiritual seekers but also for kings and emperors. Court astrologers were highly respected. They advised on coronations, battles, the founding of new cities, and even the daily schedule of rulers. It is said that many dynasties would not begin a campaign without consulting the stars. To us today, it might sound like superstition, but to them, it was strategy. If a ruler believed that the alignment of planets could tip the balance of fate, then ignoring astrology was simply not an option. At the same time, astrology was never restricted only to the elite village astrologers became part of everyday life. Whether it was fixing a marriage date, starting a new business, or naming a child, families turned to Jyotish for guidance. The Panchang, the traditional almanac, became a household item even today. Many families keep one, consulting it to decide on festivals and auspicious timings. This popularity continued for centuries, but then came a turning point, the colonial era. With the arrival of Western scientific rationalism, astrology was ridiculed. It was labeled as unscientific and primitive. Educational systems designed by colonial administrators sidelined Jyotish in favor of modern astronomy and mathematics. The sacred science that had guided a civilization was suddenly pushed to the margins. Why don't Lord Mathematicus, the sacred science that had guided a civilization, was suddenly pushed to the margins? And yet, astrology did not disappear. In fact, the printing press gave it a new life. Cheaply printed calendars, horoscopes, and almanacs spread astrology to every corner of India. What was once elite knowledge became mass culture. In a strange twist of fate, colonial suppressions actually made astrology more democratic. Every household, from the poorest farmer to the richest merchant, could now access planetary wisdom through a printed booklet. As India moved into the modern age, astrology once again began to transform. The 20th century was a period of rapid change, with science, technology, and rational thought gaining dominance. Universities focused on physics, chemistry, and engineering, while astrology was dismissed as folklore. But in the background, it continued to thrive in people's homes, in temples, and in the offices of practicing astrologers. The fascination with the stars never left the hearts of the people. Even as trains, telephones, and radios spread across the land, people still consulted their family astrologer before a wedding or a major purchase. One of the major shifts during this period was the professionalization of astrology. In earlier times, astrology was taught from teacher to disciple in gurukuls or preserved in manuscripts within families. Now, with printing presses, new books and guides were being written in regional languages. Popular magazines began to include weekly or monthly horoscope columns, which made astrology even more accessible to the common person. Although these short forecasts lacked the depth of traditional chart analysis, they kept astrology alive in the minds of the new urban generation. Another development was the rise of astrology in politics. In a country that was awakening to independence, many leaders were deeply connected to spiritual traditions, and some quietly consulted astrologers before important decisions. This was not spoken about publicly, but it existed beneath the surface, showing how deeply astrology was still woven into Indian culture, even in the age of modern nationalism. The arrival of the computer changed everything once again. For thousands of years, astrologers had to perform long and complex calculations by hand. Casting a birth chart meant working with tables of planetary positions, converting time zones, and calculating dashas with pen and paper. Even a small mistake in mathematics could alter the reading, but when computers entered the scene in the late 20th century, astrology software transformed the practice. What once took hours could now be done in seconds. Suddenly, astrologers could focus less on calculation and more on interpretation. This made astrology more efficient, and it also opened the door to younger generations who might not have had the patience to master the mathematics but still wanted to learn the art. Localization also carried Vedic astrology far beyond India's borders. Western seekers who were already interested in yoga, meditation, and Ayurveda began to discover Jyotish. To them, it was not just a system of prediction but a spiritual tool, a way of aligning with cosmic rhythms. Universities and institutions in Europe and America began to invite Indian scholars to lecture on Jyotish books, were translated into English and other languages, creating an international audience that saw astrology not as superstition but as part of a holistic worldview. In the modern era, astrology is no longer confined to temples or traditional households. It is on mobile phones, in online consultations, on YouTube channels, and in podcasts. Anyone with an internet connection can get their chart read within minutes. Some websites even generate detailed reports, complete with predictions, remedies, and guidance. Artificial intelligence has begun to enter this space too, creating algorithms that interpret charts instantly. For some, this makes astrology more mechanical, while for others, it makes it more democratic and widely available. Yet, despite all these advances, the essence of Jyotish has remained unchanged. At its heart, it is still about understanding the play of karma, the cycles of life, and the lessons that each soul must face. Whether it is through an old pandit in a village reading from a handwritten almanac or through an app on a smartphone, the question people ask is the same: what is my path, and how can I walk it with wisdom? Astrology today also faces challenges. In a world dominated by science and evidence, many dismiss it as unproven or irrational. Critics point out that planets millions of kilometers away cannot possibly affect our daily lives. But practitioners reply that astrology was never about physical causation. It is about correlation, about seeing the universe as a mirror of the self. Just as the tides respond to the moon, they say, our lives too are shaped by rhythms we may not fully understand. To believers, astrology is not about blind faith, but about patterns, symbols, and the search for meaning. And perhaps this is why astrology is finding new relevance in the 21st century. In a world of uncertainty, people seek guidance. In a time of stress and disconnection, people seek purpose. Astrology offers a language of meaning, a way of connecting the personal with the cosmic. It reminds us that we are part of something larger than ourselves. As we move deeper into the 21st century, Vedic astrology has taken on new forms and new roles. In India, it is still an everyday companion. A couple considering marriage will almost always match horoscopes. A family planning a new home will look for the right mukra or auspicious time. And even major institutions, from businesses to film producers, quietly consult astrologers before finalizing big launches. Astrology is not seen as something separate from life, it is a part of life itself. At the same time, astrology has also become a source of entertainment and mass curiosity. Turn on a television channel, and you might see a daily astrology show where viewers call in with questions about career, health, or relationships. On YouTube, thousands of creators upload weekly and monthly predictions with millions of views. For some people, this is a serious guide. For others, it is simply a moment of comfort, like reading a weather forecast for the soul. But behind the surface level, there are still dedicated scholars keeping the tradition alive in its purest form across India. In cities like Varanasi, Ujjain, and Jaipur, you will find astrologers who have spent decades memorizing scriptures, practicing meditation, and refining their understanding of Jyotish. For them, astrology is not a business but a sadhana, a spiritual practice. They see themselves not as fortune tellers but as guides who help others navigate karma with awareness and humility. Outside India, the picture is just as interesting. In the West, where Vedic astrology is often called by its Sanskrit name, Jyotish, many seekers are drawn to its spiritual depth. Unlike Western astrology, which is based on the tropical zodiac, Vedic astrology uses the sidereal zodiac, which aligns more closely with the actual constellations in the sky. This difference often surprises people when they discover that their sun sign changes under the Vedic system, but instead of seeing it as a contradiction, many embrace it as a richer, more ancient perspective. Astrology has also found a place in the holistic wellness movement. Alongside yoga and Ayurveda, Jyotish is now seen as one of the three sister sciences of ancient India. Together, they provide a complete system of body, mind, and spirit. Yoga disciplines the body, Ayurveda heals the body, and Jyotish illuminates the mind and destiny. This integrated approach has resonated deeply with people seeking balance in a modern, chaotic world. Yet, even as it flourishes, astrology also faces criticism and skepticism. Many modern scientists argue that it cannot be tested or proven in controlled experiments. They point out that the gravitational pull of distant planets is negligible compared to everyday forces around us. To this, practitioners respond that astrology is not about physical influence but about symbolic resonance. Just as the hands of a clock do not cause time but indicate it, the planets do not force events but reflect them. This debate is unlikely to end soon, but it keeps astrology alive in the public imagination, forcing it to continually define and refine itself. Looking ahead, one cannot ignore the role of technology. Already, apps can generate horoscopes instantly, offer remedies, and even provide compatibility scores between partners. Artificial intelligence is beginning to analyze patterns in birth charts, sometimes offering insights that surprise even seasoned astrologers. Some worry that this will reduce astrology to mere numbers, stripping away the intuition and spiritual dimension. Others believe it will free astrologers from repetitive work and allow them to focus on deeper interpretation and counseling. Perhaps the most important question is not whether astrology is scientifically provable, but whether it is meaningful. People turn to Jyotish not just for predictions, but for perspective. When someone loses a job, or faces heartbreak, or struggles with illness, astrology offers a larger framework. It says this too is part of your journey. It says time is not random chaos, but a cycle. It says every shadow has a light. For many, this reassurance is far more valuable than any precise forecast. In this sense, the future of Vedic astrology may be less about fortune telling and more about self realization. Instead of asking, will I succeed? People may ask, what is my dharma? Instead of asking, when will I find love? They may ask, how can I become love? Jyotish then becomes not just predictive but transformative, guiding people to align with their higher purpose. And so, the evolution of Vedic astrology continues, from ancient sages gazing at the stars, to kings consulting court astrologers, to modern seekers opening apps on their phones. The essence has remained the same. It is the search for light in the darkness, the search for meaning in the mysteries of life. As long as human beings look up at the night sky and wonder, as long as we feel awe at the vastness of the cosmos, astrology will remain. It may change form, it may face criticism, it may adapt to new technologies, but its core will endure. Because it is not merely about planets and stars, it is about us, our hopes, our fears, our questions, and our longing to find our place in the universe. And perhaps that is why Jyotish is called the science of light, for no matter how dark the path may seem, there is always a light above, guiding, reminding, and illuminating.